So Camilla Parker Bowles just had her Windsor Castle access permanently revoked by a dead woman, and the way it happened is honestly more brutal than anything I've seen on a Netflix drama. The announcement didn't come from a balcony, it didn't come from a speech, it didn't come from some carefully worded palace press release. It came from a solicitor standing in front of a silent table, holding a sealed document with Queen Elizabeth's private signature on it. And within minutes, Camilla's entire future at Windsor was just gone. The late Queen left behind a permanent clause, and here's the key detail that makes this whole thing inescapable. No king, no courtier, no royal marriage can overturn it. That's not a suggestion, that's not a preference, that's a legally binding instruction designed to survive changes of reign, changes of title, changes of household structure, everything. So right there, before anyone even opened their mouth, the outcome was already decided. Now, before we get into what this actually means for the royal family, do us a quick favor and hit subscribe to Crown Watch so you don't miss any updates on this story. It helps the channel, and honestly, the situation is still developing. So picture this room. Palace solicitors summoned King Charles, Prince William, Princess Anne, and Camilla into Windsor's administrative wing after archivists authenticated a sealed addendum to the late Queen's estate instructions. An addendum is basically a legally attached addition to an existing document, and this one carried the force of a private command. Windsor mattered here because it's not just a residence. It represents continuity, family authority, the late monarch's entire legacy. The senior solicitor opened the file and spoke without any ornament, without softening anything, and nobody in that room dared challenge the wording aloud. Queen Elizabeth's clause permanently blocked Camilla, the Queen Consort, from living at Windsor, from holding private apartments there, from exercising any household authority inside the castle. Charles didn't interrupt. His fingers tightened against the table because he understood something that probably hit him like a freight train in that moment. Even as the monarch, he couldn't cancel what his mother had designed to outlast him. Camilla at first assumed the restriction was about ceremony, like maybe she couldn't host certain events or stand in certain positions during formal occasions. But then the lawyer clarified the actual ban, and it's so much more comprehensive than that. No overnight stays, no private office, no power over staff appointments, and this is the part that really lands: no future widowhood arrangement within Windsor's walls. They literally planned ahead for what would happen if Charles died first. They made sure she couldn't stay there even then. Her face changed when that sank in. This rejection wasn't temporary, and it wasn't symbolic. It reached into every single future she had imagined beside the king. Anne noticed there was a second sealed page beneath the first one. She asked what it contained, but the solicitor refused to reveal it until everyone in that room formally acknowledged the restriction. William stayed still, but his glance toward the Princess Royal suggested he understood more than he was saying out loud. And then Camilla did something that I think tells you exactly where her head was at. She reached into her handbag, removed her Windsor access card, and placed it sharply on a polished table. Just click. Right there, the solicitor slid it back toward her and quietly explained that palace security would deactivate it before sunset anyway. She pushed back her chair and demanded to know why the late Queen had distrusted her so completely. Charles looked down, William looked toward Anne, and somewhere behind their silence was an incident the family had buried for years. The clause had closed Windsor's gates, but the deeper wound wasn't the restriction itself. It was knowing that Queen Elizabeth had expected this exact confrontation long before anyone else saw it coming. For Charles, Windsor was never just stone and ceremony and royal tradition. It was memory, it was duty, it was the place where his mother carried the monarchy through its darkest hours. And now, the woman he loved had been legally separated from that inheritance by the mother he still mourns. One signature placed him between two loyalties, and whichever side he chose was going to feel like betrayal. He'd spent years trying to bring his marriage into harmony with the crown, hoping that patience and service and public acceptance had finally secured Camilla's place within royal life. But Windsor carries a completely different meaning for everyone caught in this dispute. To the king, it holds his mother's presence. To William, it represents continuity, that unbroken transfer of duty from one reign to the next. To Anne, it demands obedience, and to Camilla, it had become the final proof that she truly belonged. She waited until they were alone before speaking. Her anger had faded into something quieter and more painful. Charles tried to explain that defying the clause could provoke a family rupture and a constitutional crisis, meaning a conflict over whether the monarch could ignore a binding instruction tied to royal property and household authority. But she didn't hear a legal argument. She heard hesitation. She heard a husband preparing to surrender her future to the judgment of a woman who was no longer there to defend or explain it. Camilla asked whether she would always remain a tolerated outsider, even after decades of loyalty beside him. The king opened his mouth, then stopped. That pause wounded her more than any harsh answer could have. She asked whether he would leave Windsor with her that evening. He looked toward the closed door and said softly that he had to remain for the next legal briefing. She nodded once, but the silence between them carried accusation and grief and defeat. William found Anne in a nearby corridor and lowered his voice. The prince believed the clause had been written not simply to exclude Camilla, but to prevent a future transfer of control after Charles became king. Anne admitted that her mother had once warned her that royal residences were rarely taken through ownership. They were captured quietly through staff appointments, private offices, guest lists, security access, control over daily routines. Piece by piece, authority could shift before anyone publicly acknowledged it. That's actually the most insightful part of this whole thing because it reframes everything. It wasn't about whether Camilla was nice or mean or popular. It was about whether the operational control of Windsor could silently change hands through 1,000 small administrative decisions. Charles returned to the legal room and demanded the confidential history behind the restriction. The solicitor opened a separate file and revealed that one Windsor ceremony had permanently changed Queen Elizabeth's view of Camilla. His decision to stay behind for that briefing didn't end their marriage, but it reopened an older fracture, one that began on the exact night Queen Elizabeth decided Windsor could never safely pass into Camilla's hands. Years before the solicitors ever opened that sealed instruction, Windsor had witnessed a private confrontation that almost no one understood at the time. It happened after a memorial reception when a disputed guest list, a locked apartment, and one unauthorized order reached Queen Elizabeth within minutes of each other. By midnight, the monarch had made a decision that would outlive her, and one woman's future inside the castle was already over. Here's what was happening behind the scenes. Camilla's household had been expanding its reach slowly during the final years of the Queen's reign. Requests kept arriving, more office space, greater access to guest suites, a stronger voice in ceremonial planning, closer control over private staff ahead of the succession. Queen Elizabeth allowed limited cooperation, but she refused to let Windsor's authority shift before the crown formally passed to Charles. To her, the castle wasn't simply a home. It was a living center of command, and even small changes could reveal who believed the next reign had already begun. The breaking point came after a private memorial reception for Prince Philip. Camilla instructed a senior housekeeper to prepare the former East Terrace rooms for her personal use during a future royal gathering. The order was given without the monarch's approval. Those rooms carried deep family meaning because they had belonged to Elizabeth's private household, and changing their use would have signaled more than just comfort. It would have suggested succession before surrender. The housekeeper approached the Queen after the reception, shaken and uncertain, and asked whether she truly intended to give up the rooms while she was still living. Elizabeth understood immediately. She summoned Camilla privately and asked who had authorized the decision. The future queen consort answered that she was only planning for continuity. But the monarch heard something colder in those words. She heard a claim being made before permission had been offered. Queen Elizabeth took the proposed room assignment sheet, folded it once without reading it aloud, and placed it beneath a silver paperweight before telling Camilla, "These rooms are not waiting for you." That same evening, Elizabeth called Anne to her side and dictated the first version of the Windsor restriction. She explained that service beside the sovereign did not automatically give anyone guardianship over royal inheritance. Later, palace solicitors strengthened the wording and added a clause preventing any future king from granting Camilla residential power through a new warrant, which is basically an official written authority issued by the monarch. Months afterward, Charles learned that his mother had raised a serious warning. He chose silence, hoping the anger would fade. Instead, the warning became law. The clause was born from that single sentence. But when Camilla learned that Charles had known there was a warning and kept silent, Windsor's legal dispute became a deeply personal confrontation. She could endure the judgment of solicitors, the cold language of sealed clauses, even the humiliation of surrendering her access. What she could not endure was learning that Charles had once been warned. Behind closed doors, the legal dispute became a marital reckoning. No aid stood between them. No prepared statement softened the truth. There was only anger and grief, and a question the king had avoided for years. Camilla carried the historical file into a private drawing room and placed it before Charles with both hands. Her voice stayed controlled at first, but the restraint made the accusation sharper. She demanded to know when he had first learned that Queen Elizabeth was considering restrictions on her Windsor role. The king admitted that his mother had raised concerns about household boundaries, meaning limits on who could control rooms, staff, access, and daily decisions inside a royal residence. He insisted that he never saw the final clause and believed the disagreement had ended after the East Terrace incident. Camilla refused to accept that. She reminded him of the years she had spent beside him through scandal, rejection, public anger, private humiliation. Now, she said he was protecting the memory of the late queen while leaving the living woman beside him to carry the punishment alone. Charles answered that defending her couldn't mean destroying his mother's final instruction. William and Anne viewed the clause as a direct command to protect Windsor's institutional identity, the castle's role as a symbol of continuity beyond any marriage or reign. Then Camilla revealed what no one in the legal room had known. She had already approved preliminary plans for a permanent Windsor office, including staff transfers and a private communication suite, believing the king would formalize everything later. Charles stared at her. The plans made the late monarch's fears look less like suspicion and more like prophecy. William entered only after hearing their voices rise. The prince confirmed that every proposed transfer had been frozen. Camilla turned on him immediately, accusing the future king of using his grandmother's clause to speed up her removal. He denied acting from revenge, but his calmness only deepened her fury. Camilla asked Charles to look her in the eye and promise he would overturn the clause. He reached toward her, but she stepped back, and the space between them became the answer. Neither was willing to speak. Anne arrived carrying the second sealed page. She didn't hand it to Charles. Instead, she placed it before the solicitor and waited. Their confrontation exposed the marriage beneath the monarchy, but that second sealed page was about to reveal that emotional loyalty no longer determined who controlled Windsor's future. The second page didn't offer sympathy or explanation or compromise. It named the guardian. Queen Elizabeth had anticipated that Charles might one day face an impossible conflict between his wife and his inheritance, so she removed the final